Breaking news, Suella Braverman is not to be... Well, in fact, let's read from the Prime Minister's letter. He spoke to his ethics advisor, Sir Laurie Magnus, who said there is no case to answer. It doesn't require an investigation. At last, a bit of common sense. Let's get a political reaction from Stephen Pound, who's presumably very disappointed that the Home Secretary is not going to be fired.
No, I mean, I can think of 101 reasons why Suella Braverman should be fired. This is not one of them.
Good.
Yeah, this is just a nonsense. I mean, she asked a civil servant for advice, the civil servant gave him advice, and then she...
Well, what's...
Yeah, it was just saying what she said in her letter when the speeding offence was when she was Attorney General. Yeah. She was going to do a speeding course. When she becomes Home Secretary, she's then got... She's a protected person. She's got protection officers.
I can understand that.
So is it appropriate? And if
well, the thing is,
should she do it on her own?
Of all the people I can imagine speeding like Mr. Toad through the back streets of Fareham or Hampshire, wherever it is, she's probably the least likely person to be there.
Well, you only have to go 23 and a 20 now, and you can get 3 points.
Well, I hope it was rather more than that.
Well, hang on.
Oh, it won't be.
Archbishop of Canterbury was 25 and a 20-mile-an-hour limit, and
Absolutely.
he got a fine. I'd rather please, because I can't stand
Surveillance state. The surveillance state, you see, Stephen Pound. Emma Webb, let's come to you. What she says in this letter, it's quite interesting.
Yeah.
You know, it is quite fascinating. Rishi Sunak gives you 1 page. Yeah, fine, I'm sorted. She's done like a 3-page, very, very verbose explanation. She says because of her position, she didn't want to do a Zoom call because you can do them online, because she said somebody could record her and release the footage. So she said, I asked to do it in person in the classroom, and then they said they couldn't do that because she couldn't have her security with her in the classroom because that would breach the privacy of the other people on the course. Perfectly logical.
Yeah, completely. I don't think she's done anything wrong, and I think this entire thing is completely vexatious. I think this is to do with the fact that she recently gave this speech at the National Conservatism Conference. It's not that she's launching some kind of coup against the Prime Minister, but she's clearly shown that she's more robust. Now we have to just look at the papers today with Rishi Sunak trying to posture and be tough on immigration, when the reality is that Braverman is the only person really at the top of the Conservative Party who's been taking issues to do with immigration seriously. She was fantastic at the National Conservatism Conference. Obviously somebody's got a bug to bear, and this just seems to me to be a complete stitch-up.
The civil service blob have a bug to bear.
Interestingly...
I think they got rid of Dominic Raab, Stephen, with the bullying.
I think Dominic Raab made it slightly easy for them. But what's interesting is when Tony, go back that glorious May Day 1997, you know, the Labour landslide.
You thought it was glorious.
The nation thought it was glorious. Anyway, they said, well, we won the Eurovision Song Contest. But
that's true, actually.
Tony Blair addressed us, all of us Blair babes, and he said there's a number of things I've discovered that we're going to do differently. One is no MP could actually get a speeding fine because you couldn't. Because I remember going up the M6, it was like the paparazzi, the lights flashing. But the chief constable of the county had to approve it, and of course they never did. And Tony Blair said we're going to stop that. MPs weren't allowed to be on juries, because we're MPs. Tony Blair stopped that. And funny enough, after that thing came in, a number of MPs were caught speeding, and they were allowed to actually expunge the details of the fine. It wasn't made public knowledge. I mean, they still had to pay it, but it wasn't public knowledge.
Why were they allowed to do that?
God knows how they did it, but anyway, it's then changed. But the point being that if you've got 4 or 5 security people around you, it's just ludicrous suggestion to actually... I mean, personally, in her, I think she should have just paid the money. And I think had she been Home Secretary at the time, she probably would have. But I think that's the difference, and I think you're quite right to differentiate between her 2 roles.
Because it did change completely, because when she was Attorney General, there was no security issue with her. Now I've seen her security people, they're never very far from her, and they're armed. Because she's a protected person as Home Secretary.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a complete non-story, and I think that it's not just this, it's many other instances like it. I think that, do we have time for this nonsense? Do we have time for this? It's the same with Boris Johnson, perpetual obsession over these small things that are clearly vexatious. I don't think the Home Secretary's done anything wrong. I think she's been vindicated by this. And I think that this should lead us all to ask questions about the way that the blob and the way that our politics and its relationship with the media is operating, because it's distracting us with all of these things. And Suella Braverman is trying to do a good job over immigration. She's trying to serve the British people something, firstly, that she was elected to do, but also that the Conservative Party was elected to do, with a mandate of the British public to deal with immigration. They haven't done it. She's trying to deal with it, and she's faced with all of these hurdles from just simply being able to do her job properly.
And Stephen, the timing, just before Prime Minister's questions, also the Prime Minister has stirred up an unholy revolt on his backbenches over the fact Boris has been referred to the police without anybody in the Cabinet Office talking to him about these diaries which he handed over to civil servants. Why did it take till today to clear her?
There is a certain stench that lingers over this, and I'm not entirely sure that the people involved in the civil service were entirely neutral in this particular matter.
Funny that.
But it's bizarre. But that could well be the case. And I think not for the first time. Emma's probably put a finger on it too. But I thought the best thing, of course, was hearing Sir Edward Lee speaking in the House. I don't know if you heard him.
Conservative senior backbencher.
Indeed, and a great man who said, call this a scandal. In the old days, we used to have proper scandals. It's sex and money and invading Iraq, real scandals.
Yeah. He's right.
He very often is right.
Yeah, yeah. But people watching will think the police. The trust in the police is collapsing all over the country. We're seeing what's happening in Cardiff with the riots. Why are the police now going to have to spend time poring over these diaries, going back to 2020 and 2021? Yeah. We move on. We've got a public inquiry, Stephen, that's going to take 4 or 5 flipping years. We've got the Privileges Committee still hasn't reported on Boris, who gave evidence weeks ago. It's not what people want.
No, I remember Chilcot, which was, I think, 11 years, which I think was the third Iraq inquiry. It's ridiculous. And I think your point is a very interesting one. Is there a stage at which the police can say, up with this, we will not put, this is nonsense? I'm sorry,
because they probably don't want this.
Well, of course they don't. They're up to their eyes in problems and things at the moment. Yeah. And so Mark Rowley's probably looking at it and said, oh, my Lord, please, not another nonsense like this. Yeah. He's going to have to put 6 officers on it. Yeah. They're going to have to work right round the clock. For what end?
And it now delays the privileges investigation, which is ongoing, chaired by Harriet Harman, Labour MP, who's already made it absolutely clear what she thinks about Boris Johnson breaking the rules, because she said so in the House. So she's hardly an impartial view on it.
She was talking in the generality.
It's not only dirty, it's also stupid. Because, firstly, it's making it look as if the civil service is even more politicised than the public already believe it to be. And it's also repeatedly, stories like this, repeatedly dragging the police into politicised situations where they have no choice but to investigate it, but obviously it's compromising them in some way. And as Stephen said, the British public are already, for obvious reasons, serious decline in trust in the police for many very good reasons, but also because they're being sort of dragged into these political or progressive scandals. And the whole thing, I think, many people will be looking at this and thinking, actually, frankly, this just stinks.
And honestly, Harman was specific about Boris breaking the rules, not a generality. She responded to a very rude tweet by Alistair Campbell, and she said, these were rules he made, and they were egregious breaches. She was very overt. Couldn't be clearer.
Look, she likes
Boris
it,
broken the rules.
Yeah.
No, she added her own quote to it too, and she chaired this inquiry. How can she be chairing an inquiry into Boris, which she's made her mind up?
I think most people, she's a case here, most people know that she's...
She wakes every morning, Stephen, thinking, how can I damage the Tory party?
I'd rather think not.
Yes, she does.
You've obviously woken up with her more often than I have.
She's one of the most tribal Labour MPs I've ever met. You know she's tribal.
Well, most of us are to a certain degree.
No, you're not as tribal, because you've been objected today.
I do.
Unusually.
Unfortunately, the 4 of us are going to agree on this. Can we not find something to...
Well, we might agree on this.
Well, the 3-page letter, what did the apologia por vita sua? Is she saying anything about the civil service in that letter?
She said she talked...
Is she talking about this malignant, tumor?
No, she hasn't said that. No, she's just been very objective and clear.
Sorry,